The sun shone brightly over the horizon, dyeing the sky in warm golden hues while the waves gently crashed on the sand. The fresh sea breeze spread a salty aroma in the air, creating a perfect atmosphere for a day of rest. The normally busy beach seemed to have gained an almost supernatural calm, as if the environment itself was awaiting the arrival of a great figure. And as if fate had conspired, the sound of a powerful engine cut through the silence of the afternoon, breaking the tranquility of the landscape. It was the moment that everyone on the beach had been waiting for. From inside the luxurious car, with its wheels cutting through the fine sand, the silhouette of Maria Sharapova appeared. The camera slowly approached, capturing every detail of her entrance. The world-famous athlete, with an imposing aura and natural elegance, stepped out of the vehicle in style. Dressed in a minimalist but sophisticated swimsuit, she quickly caught the attention of everyone around her. It was not only her radiant beauty that made people stop and stare, but the power she exuded. Like a champion who brought with her all the grandeur of her tennis career. As Maria walked towards the sand, a murmur filled the beach. Some people could not believe that they were seeing one of the greatest athletes of all time up close, while others were simply carried away by the star's magnetic presence. Cameras began to flash, capturing her every move, as if simply seeing her there in such a relaxed setting was a unique and unrepeatable experience. But there was something else in the air, something that seemed to contradict the public image of an elite athlete. A mix of admiration and expectation hung in the air. Maria, however, seemed at ease. She looked at the team and, with a calm smile, said, "Today is just for me. A day for me, away from the glamour, away from all the pressure." Her words, simple but profound, gave the feeling that she was looking for something beyond fame, something that was just hers, something that would connect her back to who she really was. The camera focused on her face, which conveyed a serenity almost unrecognizable for someone with her background, showing that, even under the watchful eyes of everyone, she seemed eager for this moment of freedom. As security and staff strategically positioned themselves around her, the atmosphere on the beach was bustling. Fans, onlookers, and even the most skeptical were all there, gathered for one reason. Maria Sharapova was finally here, in front of them in the flesh, without the spotlight of a tournament or the weight of career expectations. What seemed like a simple day at the beach quickly turned into an event that defied the conventions of what was expected of a sports star. And then, like a silent invitation, the sand seemed to say, "Come Maria, come in and surrender to freedom." But as with all things fame, there was more to it than just a celebration of personal life. The tension, though barely perceptible, was present in every glance. And the question that began to arise in everyone's minds was simple. Could Maria Sharapova really be free, even in such a public and controlled setting? What seemed like just a day of rest at first carried with it a layer of complexity. What was she really looking for? And more importantly, what would she have to sacrifice to finally achieve what many believed to be total freedom? Maria Sharapova's story on that day at the beach had barely begun. But one thing was certain, no one there would stop wanting to find out what would come next. The sea was calm, as if the entire ocean was waiting for Maria to enter its waters. With confident steps, she approached the water's edge, letting the waves gently touch her feet. Her expression was relaxed, almost distant from the pressures of the life she knew outside of that moment. The beach, now calmer, seemed to have become an isolated refuge where the athlete was no longer a public figure or a tennis champion, but simply a woman in search of peace and fun. As the waves lapped against her skin, Maria let out a genuine smile, something she rarely showed in the flashes of events or in quick interviews after a victory or defeat. A small group of friends were present at her side, sharing this rare moment of freedom with her. Relaxed conversations began to emerge as the group got closer to the water. Maria's laughter echoed, now lighter and more carefree. Between jokes and jokes, she revealed a side that few had the opportunity to see, the Maria who was not behind the cameras, but the woman who, behind all the grandeur, also sought simple moments of joy. Finally, a day to forget about tennis, the competitions, and everything else, she said to a close friend, as if it were possible to completely disconnect from the world that knew her as a champion. The freedom she felt at that moment seemed intoxicating, as if the weight of years of career were disappearing into the salty seawater. But the depth of this freedom was not limited to laughter and jokes. During this casual interaction, Maria began to reflect on the constant pressure she was under, not only to win, but to be perfect in every move. In the middle of the conversation with her friends, she had a brief moment of introspection. The smile that had previously seemed pure and sincere was momentarily restrained. A silence took over the conversation as she seemed to absorb the words her friend had just said. Have you ever stopped to think that perhaps we live more for what others expect of us than for ourselves? This simple question made her realize the uncomfortable truth that surrounded her. Even though she was there, on the beach, in an environment of total relaxation, part of her was still tied to the life that her fame had imposed on her. At that moment, the sea seemed deeper than ever. The waves that reached her feet seemed to carry a silent message, as if the ocean were offering relief from the weight of her fame. Maria Sharapova, known worldwide for her mental strength and her ability to impose herself on the court, was beginning to allow herself a little emotional rest. She went a little deeper into the water, moving away from her friends for a moment, as if the sea had become a metaphor for her internal struggle. On the one hand, the attraction of her public life, and on the other, the need to get away from it all in order to find true peace. Her thoughts began to mingle with the sound of the waves and the cool wind that blew on her face, giving her a feeling of distance from everything that accompanied her outside of that scene. But it wasn't long before the fun took over again. Like a child rediscovering the simple pleasure of being in the sea, Maria gave herself over to the game. She challenged her friends to a race to see who could jump the highest into the waves. Laughter filled the air, and for a few moments it seemed like the outside world no longer existed. The goal wasn't to win, but just to have fun. In that moment, Maria Sharapova was just an ordinary woman, far from the crowds, the million-dollar contracts, and the demanding gazes of fans. She was there in her entirety, simply enjoying the company of those who really mattered. However, even in this moment of relaxation, a part of her mind continued to question, to what extent could she truly be free, knowing that her fame would never leave her alone? And as she continued to play in the waves, something else began to form inside her. The feeling of weightlessness, of being able to let go, of being truly present in the water, was a reflection of a much deeper desire. The desire to finally find balance between the two Maria Sharapovas. The one the world saw as a champion, and the woman who yearned for something more than the expectations of everyone around her. But to what extent would this duality be possible to achieve? Unlike simple play in the sea, the answers to this question were not easy to find. And perhaps this day at the beach was just the beginning of an even greater journey of self-discovery. As the sun began to set below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and red, Maria Sharapova stepped gently out of the water, leaving behind the cool waves. The cool sand now enveloped her bare feet as she walked to the shore, where she found a quiet spot to sit and gaze out at the vast ocean before her. The vastness of the sea seemed to mirror her mind, deep, full of possibilities, yet also mysterious and complex. It was the perfect moment for reflection, one of those rare moments when the silence of the surroundings blended with the inner turmoil of an intense life. And there, on the border between land and sea, Maria allowed herself to be present in a way she rarely did. Sitting alone, she stared at the waves gently crashing onto the shore, as if searching for an answer, a sign of clarity. The day that had begun with such lightness and fun now confronted her with a truth she could no longer ignore. Even though she was here, far from the cameras and the glamour, the sense of freedom was only superficial. As much as the sea offered a sense of peace, the fame, pressure, and expectations she had carried since her childhood as an elite athlete were deeply ingrained in her life. No matter how hard she tried to escape, a part of her knew that when she returned, the world of her public life would await her again, with the same demands, the same challenges. As the gentle wind ruffled her hair, Maria allowed herself a moment of introspection. She thought about the years of her career, the sacrifices, the moments of overcoming, and the victories. But she also remembered the losses, the injuries, the times when she felt she was living for other people's expectations, and not her own. Who am I if not the champion Sharapova? She thought, a thought that bothered her deeply. She knew that over the years she had become more than an athlete. She was an icon, a brand, a public figure that people projected their expectations onto. But in that moment, alone by the sea, she wondered if there was still room for Maria, the person and not just the player. I deserve this. she whispered to herself, a simple phrase but loaded with meaning. What she deserved was not just the rest, the momentary freedom of being on a secluded beach. What she really yearned for was the ability to reconcile the two versions of herself, the athlete the world admired and the woman who wanted to live for herself away from the spotlight. This internal conflict, although never completely resolved, was Maria Sharapova's true battle. Deep down, she knew that this war between freedom and fame was inevitable. And perhaps the greatest challenge of all was finding a way to coexist with both facets without losing sight of who she really was. Before standing up, Maria looked out at the sea once more, as if she were saying goodbye to a piece of herself. She knew that this day at the beach, this small haven of peace, would not solve all the issues that her public life imposed on her. But even though the pressure of fame never left her completely at peace, she knew that, in that moment, she'd achieved something rare, a glimpse of freedom. She stood up, shook the sand from her skin, and looked back one last time at the beach. Her mind was at peace, but the weight of her public life soon awaited her, as it always had. And yet, in that brief interval of time, Maria Sharapova had experienced something much more valuable. The possibility of being, even if only for a day, an ordinary person, simply existing and being who she truly wanted to be. With a soft smile, she headed to her car where her team was waiting. They knew the world outside was waiting for her, but they also knew that for that brief period of time, Maria had found something that most others, even with her fame and success, would never know, a moment of true authenticity. Deep down, she understood that perhaps a balance was needed, a middle ground between woman and champion. After all, freedom would never be absolute, but the pursuit of it was. And as she walked toward her next engagement, one thing became clear. Maria Sharapova was not looking for a definitive escape, but for a space where she could finally balance between the two worlds. The journey was far from over.